Hi everyone, this is Ian with another video about how to best use the planning system to get the most out of your properties. And in today's video we're going to be looking at lapsed planning permissions, which are permissions that are running out of time. Every decision notice has a condition on it, normally the first condition that says development must begin within 3 years of the date of this permission. Sometimes it's 5, quite rarely, but normally now it's 3. So in this video we're going to be looking at the ways that you can make sure that you start before then. The first one of those is to implement your permission. It sounds easier said than done, but this really comes down to being organised about the decision notice that you originally get. So when you get your decision notice, you'll have a number of conditions, and a bunch of those might be what's called pre-commencement. And normally they start with things that say prior to development beginning, or prior to the commencement of development, or before development begins. And sometimes that'll be at the end of the condition. So that's why it pays to read your condition well. So it might say materials, must be use acceptable materials which need to be agreed by the council prior to development beginning. So reading your condition thoroughly is really important to make sure that you cover everything off. So if you've got 4 conditions that you need to discharge, obviously you'll need to go about discharging them. And then once you do that, make sure that you have all of your decision notices and decision dates categorized and clearly set out so that you know what decision you got when. And then once you've done that, you're ready to implement it, which basically means that you need to commence development. And what that looks like is open for a lot of debate, but essentially most of the time it's just evidence on site that you started work, whether that's digging a trench or building a mound. The term used to be shovel in the ground, but it's a little bit more than that. So yeah, once you've done those discharge conditions, you're ready to implement the permission, and that basically means that you've got that decision in perpetuity, which means that you've got it forever in theory. Second step, which is apply for a certificate of lawfulness. Normally, what a lot of people see certificate of lawfulness is being used for is for things like rear extensions or changes of use. Basically anything that they think is proposed in the future, but they can be used for existing things. These are sound like quite simple things, but they can be quite involved, and what makes them really easy is to be really have chapter and verse about every step that you've taken. Because if you've got close to the 3 years, you've discharged your conditions, and you're quite close to the 3 years, and you're not sure whether it's touch and go whether you're going to start before. If you do start before and you want to make sure that's evidenced, then you can go down this route, which is discharging existing certificate, and then you'll need to evidence. So if you do have a digger on site and you've dug trenches and you think that you've started on site, being really clear on the type of information that you've got for these is really, really important. So things like dated photographs, invoices, contracts, dated contracts. So if you've chosen a contractor, it's signed and dated, and in there it's got evidence about what date you're going to start and how long it's going to take, etc. And the other big one is statutory declarations, which is someone declaring in the presence of a solicitor that they believe something to be true. So if it's a contractor, it would say, it can be as long or as short as you like, but it can say I was the appointed contractor on this permission and I started date on X date, and then it's signed by a solicitor, so it's more evidence. Other things like accounts, receipts of services or materials received, those are the main things. And that sounds like a lot, and it is, but like I said before, when it comes to these certificates, the onus is on the applicant to prove that something is correct. So that's why you can never have too much information. So it's really, really important to get all of this information set out, because if you can just go, apply for a certificate and just hand over a massive wad of information to the officer, and there's just everything stacking up saying, yeah, all the conditions are discharged, they're all the right ones. Here's some evidence that they've started. Here's some photos. Here's some agreements. Here's some contracts. Here's a statutory declaration, and the officer then goes on site to prove that everything is true for themselves. Then you're in a great place for that. certificate to be issued. Because if you're not intending on building out the permission, it then becomes like a legal agreement that you can hand over to the next buyer to say, everything in the planning, everything is packed up in this planning world. You just hand it over, and they just need to worry about, from that point on, they don't need to worry about the permission lapsing or anything, because permissions lapsing that leads me on to my third point. Because if your permission lapses and you haven't kept up to date with this information, and this happened quite a lot when I was an officer, 3 years would come up and they haven't discharged all their conditions, and there would be pleads by the applicant to say, oh, please, can we just have a bit more time? I'm going to start, and you can't do that. So if you've missed your permission, if you missed the end of your 3 years, there used to be this mechanism called, it wasn't called anything, but you could renew your permission, but that mechanism is long gone. So no longer can you just say, yeah, just give me another 3 years or whatever, because that was taken away because people were land banking, and planning moves at quite a slow pace. It's a slow moving world. But having said that, if 3 or 4 years have passed since you got your last decision, there may be some stuff that's changed that really does affect you applying again. Because if you apply again for the same development, you might think, oh, just the same things, I'll get the same conditions and I'll have to do the same contributions as I did originally. But that's not always the case. I mean, I worked on a site once where someone had to pay a 5-figure affordable housing contribution. They let their permission lapse by 3 years, and then they applied again and they had to pay well into the 6 figures of affordable housing contributions. So, it can really be an expensive mistake to make. So, just to sum up, make sure you discharge all the relevant pre-commencement conditions, and it's a good idea to kind of package all your pre-commencement conditions together on a table. What are the reference numbers? When was it discharged? What has been discharged? Get all the dates, and then if you're getting close to the date and you want to prove that you've implemented it, then you can go to the step of submitting a certificate, and that's where loads of evidence, keeping hold of evidence is really important. I've said before, signed agreements, signed statements, photos, that step. And unfortunately, if you get to the third step, you need to reapply, which might not be the end of the world, but it could be, well, not the end of the world obviously, but it could be a very expensive mistake. So yeah, those are the 3 steps. I hope you find value out of it, and I'll see you on the next video.